Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Empowerment Project podcast by Andrea Bosco and Dr. Shar. We are so happy to have you here. Thank you all for listening and following us. Make sure you're following us on Spotify, and please leave a comment if you are enjoying our discussions. We love to hear what you have to say, so you can leave a comment or you can even reach out to us on social media at the Empowerment Project number 2 at the end of that. So, we're going to jump right into today's topic. It is quite poignant for this time of the year. We thought it was a really important theme to discuss: stress around the holidays.
Yay,
And
we love that.
yeah. So, yeah, we're going to jump right in, and I'm going to let Shar jump right in here and talk a little bit about why we thought this was a good thing to talk about right now. And yeah, so go ahead. Let us
Yeah,
know.
so I'm just gonna say that it's been interesting, right? This time of year, sorry, is so stressful for a lot of people. And, we kind of walk through it because we have to go through it. But over the last couple of weeks, I've had patients coming in and telling me about their particular stress around the holiday. And so, it's not just about, the financial commitments of buying presents and, certain parents that are doing it all, not just for their side of the family but their partner side of the family, hosting, setting menus, decorating, who's bringing what, where's the holiday party being held,
Mhm.
who's coming and who's not coming, so so and so doesn't talk to so and so, should I have that person over at the house or should I have the other person over at the house? So we're I mean it's been pretty nonstop these last 2
Mhm.
weeks, and all of these issues are coming up for individuals. And I know because it's such a stressful time, it's kind of like an orange being squeezed, right? And then all the juice comes out. So everyone's issues just sort of come out when there's a lot of stress involved. And um, I think when I talk to my patients, the one thing that I tell them is that whatever you're feeling, you're not the only one feeling it. Everyone around you, or everyone that's a part of your family, is probably feeling it too, but in a different way. And
Mhm.
they're like, okay, well, I don't understand what you're saying. And so the way that I understand is, okay, so everybody has a different point of view. Even though you may go through the exact same experience, let's just say even the upbringing, like your parents, okay, your parents are raising you in exactly the same environment, in, pretty much the same way, the best way that they could. So you've all had the same experience under a roof, but your point of view of the experience is different.
Mhm.
And so we've all been raised with certain beliefs and programs, and even like cultural structures and paradigms that have been set up for us, that we carry through adulthood, right? We carry through adulthood. So what happens when we are in a stressful situation, a lot of those ideas that we formulated at a very young age don't necessarily serve us as adults. And what happens is when we start having these issues with other family members or this time of year, a lot of those unseen parts of us come out. Okay.
Mhm.
So remember, there's I mean, you've got 3 siblings, I've got 4, and I know that we're 4 of us are different. I know that 3 of you are different. We all were raised by the same parents, had the same experience, same, upbringing per se, but our point of view is completely different on how we see the world, right?
Mhm.
And so, I think it's really important to understand, like, if we're because this is such a sacred time too for so many people, right? This isn't just about buying gifts and, it's not just about buying gifts. It's not that commercial side of it. It's a very sacred time of year. And, I think people forget that the reason why we want to get together is because we want to break bread, we want to share love, we want to be with our families. And the only way that we can really do it is to understand that everybody is doing the best that they can with the information and knowledge they have at this time in their life.
Mhm.
And you are doing the best you can, and so are the people that are around you that might be visiting with you. They're also doing the best they can. You might not see eye to eye on things, but are you able to let that go and say, they're having an experience like I'm having an experience. And even though we might not be resonating at the same level, can I be okay that we're in a different space right now? Right.
Mhm.
And there's a really big part of, like, the big thing that comes to me when I think about this is forgiveness. Because,
Mhm.
let's be honest, I don't think anybody leaves their childhood unscathed. Like, let's be
Mhm.
honest, right? Like, we've all been traumatized in some way or another. And I love the way Mel Robbins says it. Mel Robbins says, it's either little t trauma or big T trauma. And again, according to your perspective, um, you may have experienced that in in a certain way, right? And she talks about big T being, abuse and things like that, whereas little trauma might be like your parents weren't emotionally available for you. So again, that is very much depends on who you are and what your experiences were like. But what I'm saying is that we don't leave childhood without having something. And for us to think that we are going to be free of damaging our children, I think is wrong. Like, we are going to have some kind of an impact on them, and I don't want to say good or bad, but we're going to have an impact on them where they're going to have to walk through life and figure out what an experience did to them so they can dig deep and figure out how to resolve it and how to move forward. Right. So, and that's self awareness. So, we're walking through our childhood. We've all had these experiences. And so, we have to decide, what am I going to keep as an adult? What am I going to get rid of as an adult? What am I going to modify as an adult? Do I need to get support to help me through this? Because as adults, we have a choice. As children, we don't have a choice. We really don't have a choice, right? And so, again, like I said, our parents did the best that they could with the information and knowledge they have. And our gift is the ability to be self aware. Our gift is that we can pick up a book, we can get into a support group, we can find a mentor, we can find a therapist that can help us walk through these things. Because I think gone are the days where you can just point your finger and blame somebody else for your issues. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
I mean, and when I say that, I don't mean that it's always one sided. It is two sided. And we all have to accept responsibility and accountability for the situation that we find ourselves in, right? Like, right, let's accept responsibility for where we are. But once we're able to find, where we are and accept responsibility, can we look around and say, wow, you know what? In the situation where I'm feeling really uncomfortable, there's an opportunity for me to learn something. There's an opportunity for me to learn something about myself and about somebody else. Like,
Mhm.
that's self-awareness, right? Like,
Mhm.
that's huge. So, and let's be honest, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. We've talked about that before.
Yeah.
And when you are ready to be open to the lesson, that teacher is going to show up, and it sometimes it's going to be a harsh lesson, but you
Mhm.
need to be that's how you need to look at it. What is this person teaching me about me? Right?
Yes.
And then there's that gratitude portion of it, right? Like, I can be grateful right now because I'm open and because I'm willing to learn and I'm willing to not sit in a victim mentality and blame everybody and woe is me. Like, I can be grateful that this teacher has showed up for me so I can do the work that I need to do. Right. But you have to be ready for that, right? Like, that's the thing. You need to be you need to be resonating at a level where you can see that. And not everybody is ready, and that's okay too. Right?
Mhm.
I'm saying that if anybody is listening to this, you may be ready, and that's probably what's brought you to the podcast, right? You might be open to that kind of learning, and that's amazing. Someone else might not be, and you need to be okay with that. And then my favorite is the forgiveness part, Andrea, like really being able to forgive yourself and others for being where they are and for the situation that's been created, because let's be honest, not everybody's ready, and we
Mhm.
need to be okay. Like, I forgive you because you've hurt me, and I'm forgiving myself because I've hurt you. Like, forgiveness is really magical. And, we talk about the science all the time and what happens when we're not able to forgive and we are constantly in that state of thinking about something over and over again. That mental real estate that's taken up in our brain because we're constantly thinking about something. And it's rumination, right? Like when you're constantly thinking about something over and over and over again, you create neural pathways that create feelings of that thought. So if you're having a really negative and or you're thinking about something that's made you really angry, you're creating that neural pathway, and now hormones are being released to make you feel that anger. And of course, it affects the way that you behave, and then it affects everybody around you, right? So that thought, feeling, action, consequence cycle that we talk about. Um, so forgiveness is really important. And let's be honest, at the end of the day, we can't control anybody except for ourselves,
Mhm.
right? And we don't know what other people's point of views are unless they're willing to communicate them.
Mhm.
And if
Mhm.
people are not willing to open and share with you or talk with you, like communicate with you to work something out, you have to let that go too, right? You can't force things when people aren't ready. And so I don't even know what the advice was in that whole entire conversation that I've just shared with you. I think it's just about understanding that everybody's doing the best that they can with the information and knowledge they have at this point in time. And we need to find space in our heart to let go of trying to control situations that we cannot, and to be able to forgive and move. And I'm saying forgive. I know that's hard. Letting go, I know that's hard. I'm saying we just all need to try.
Yeah.
That's what I would say about that.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think the other thing on this and is that the holidays bring up a lot of our old crap.
Sure.
Um because for some people, in that gathering of family members, whether it's extended family, immediate family, whatever, you're bringing in a whole bunch of different personalities. It's maybe the second, third time in the year that you've all seen each other because we're busy. And so maybe you do it around Easter, or the Passover, or whatever the spring holidays are. Maybe you do it around Thanksgiving and then Christmas. I know that it's in my in my family. So it's like your day to day is going along boop ba doop ba doo, and then all of a sudden you have to prepare for this gathering and the dealing with the different people and personalities. And so what came up for me in the last week, and I'm going to share a funny but kind of eye-opening story that sort of came up. And sure, I did mention some of this to you last week, but my daughter was working on a school project in one of her classes, and this particular class is I found is running really well at her school in that they do focus a lot on mental health and self-awareness in this particular class. And her assignment was to write down 3 times in her life that she had a challenge or a struggle, or let's say life-changing experience. What was it? How did you deal with it? And, how are you living through it now? And the example that was on the page was, "My father left us." Like, it was pretty dramatic. So I guess
Mhm.
from that example, she was thinking, like, I need to come up with this, like, these big T trauma experiences. So she comes home and she's like, "Mom, I need to think of something." And she's like, "I can't think of anything."
Mhm.
And I said, "Okay, well, let's think of like when were you challenged? When did you have?" She's like, "Well, the first one I put was like starting high school because it was a big change, and the
Sure.
difference in schoolwork and balancing responsibility." She's like, "But I can't think of any." She's like, "Mom, I have no trauma." And we were laughing because it's like she's traumatized with the fact that she has no trauma.
Yeah.
And, at first I was like, wow, I am doing such a good job as a mom to protect my child from her trauma. And listen, part of it is that, part of it is the way I've chosen to raise my children in a conscious way, which I'm very proud of. But the other thing that made me think about it is that she doesn't know yet what she's being traumatized by
Right.
because she's in it,
Right.
right? So my parents got divorced when I was young. It started around I was 7 years old when they separated. By the time I was 9, they were divorced. And so for majority of my life I lived between households, between families. And I'll be honest, at the time, I didn't feel any trauma around the situation. I was going where I was told to go. Okay, today I'm
Mhm.
going to my mom's, tomorrow I'm going to my dad's. Okay, Christmas time it would always be split. Christmas Eve was with dad, Christmas Day was with mom. We would bounce back and it was just like, they were doing the best they could to create this cohesive life for me and my siblings, and I didn't feel trauma in the moment, right?
Mhm.
Fast forward to my adult
Mhm.
years,
Yeah.
and that's when the trauma starts to set in, where I can look back and say, wow, like that was hard for me. It was hard for me to say goodbye to my mom on the weekends when I wanted to stay longer with her.
Mhm.
Or, it was tough hearing my parents argue about things, when it came to us and, finances or whatever it is. Like, so it's always in the adult stages
Yeah.
where that childhood crap starts to bubble up.
Right.
And I'm not saying that children are not dealing with trauma now, like, I mean, when they're children, but a lot of the small things, and I was thinking about my daughter and I'm like, "Oh, she's so gonna look back at one day and be like, that was terrible, and I remember when I had to do this and I didn't wanna do it," whatever, and those little T hopefully they're just little T traumas that she's dealing with, but it does end up happening later in life, and especially these holiday times is when that crap bubbles up. And
Mhm.
I know for sure the holidays when I was a child, no, but in my adult life, this is where all that crap starts to bubble up because I'm still juggling now not only two households, it's three because I'm married and I have my husband's family that I need to see. So not only do we do Christmas Eve with my dad, we do Christmas morning at my in-laws, Christmas afternoon and evening at my mom's. So it's a lot of jumping around and it's a lot of moving parts, and it's stressful. Let's face it,
Mhm.
it's stressful.
Yeah.
And so I've had to learn how to manage that. And forgiveness has been a huge part of that.
Mhm.
I've had to practice so much forgiveness for my parents and just really believing that they were trying to do the best they could. And I know that line comes from something we heard Brene Brown talk about, which
Yeah.
is, do you believe people are doing the best they can
Yeah.
with the information they had? And I mean, we can have a whole podcast on that alone. And at first, it was hard for me to understand that because my ego wants to say, no, they aren't.
Mm.
People should know better,
Right. And
right?
that's interesting that you said ego. We'll talk about that in a second.
Right? Yeah, and it's like, no, but then I'll never forget when Brene Brown said when she asked her husband that question, he said, "I don't know if people are, but I choose to believe they are,
Mhm.
because in a world where I believe people are doing the best they can, that is a world I wanna live in.
Yeah.
That is a world that I wanna see through my eyes, and it's exactly what you said, is that it's our choice. We can't
Mhm.
control the people around us, but
Yeah.
we can control our perspective.
Mhm.
And so for me to step into situations and look at my parents and say, they're doing the best they can. They've
Mhm.
had a tough go. They've made some decisions they're not proud of, but I need to believe that they're doing the best they can, because that sets me free.
Mhm.
It's not about them and condoning actions, or, I can play the blame game all day long,
We
right?
can
Because
all do that.
I was a child when this happened, right?
Right.
But that's not going to do me any good. That's
Mhm.
only going to hold me back and fill me with resentment. And so every time I step into those situations where we're all together, and don't get me wrong, it's so much better now. I'm more thinking, like, let's say even like 10 years ago, or whatnot, when it was a bit harder. But, because I had to choose, right? I had to choose forgiveness. I had to choose acceptance, and I had to turn inward and understand what in me was being triggered
Yeah,
by their actions.
for
And
sure.
then that's how the situation started to change.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think I've done the most healing around my relationship with my mom.
Yeah.
And again, right? Like when I think about what my parents um upbringing was, like, so both my mom and dad were actually born in Pakistan. And then when the separation happened, they had to move to India, right? And when my mom tells me stories about, what they had to leave and how they had to rush out and how she lost a brother, and
Oh my
how her
gosh.
her brothers had to beg for food at the train station, just so they could survive. Like, how does that experience not impact you? And she was only 4. She was 4 or
Wow.
5 when this happened. So how does that not impact you as an adult? Right? Like seeing all the death. And my dad told me a really scary story the other day. And when all of this was happening, he was supposed to go to the well to get water. And when he looked in the well, there were dead bodies in there. So
Oh,
he's a child, and this is what he's seeing. So
wow.
again, how does that not impact you as an adult, knowing that you have witnessed something horrific like that?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
so for me, like, and then again, being East Indian, okay, so now my mom has, and my mom and dad have this type of experience in India. And then culturally, being East Indian, there are very different roles that males and females play in a household.
Mhm.
My cousins would never understand it because it was 3 girls, like they were all treated equally. They all had the same chores inside, outside the house, all that good stuff. Whereas me, I was I was parentified as a very very young.
Mhm.
So I was responsible for a lot of stuff inside the house. I was like my mom's assistant. I I started hiding myself because when I sought attention, I would never get it. And when I thought I could get attention, it was to do things to please my mom and dad in hopes that I would get that attention. And I never did. And
Mhm.
again, that's my perspective. Like, that's my point of
Mhm.
view. If I
Mhm.
ever asked my brothers or my sister, they would think I was crazy, right? But again, that was my point of view as a child. It is how I absorbed what was happening in my house. My older brother's experience, my younger brother's experience, my younger sister's experience, they're very different from me. So for my entire life, right? I've been angry at my mom because I felt like I've always lived in the shadows, right?
Mhm.
Like I was never seen, I was never heard. I was only valued if I was doing something for the family. And that was really hard. And so that was something that showed up in everything. It showed up in my relationships. It showed up in my marriage initially. It showed up when I had my first child, like just all of that stuff. So my work was around knowing that I was enough without the approval of others, right? Because
Mhm.
that's what was hurting, right? Like I wanted my mother's approval, but I didn't know if I was ever going to get it in this lifetime, right?
Mhm.
So I had the work that I've done, and you and I know a lot of the work that you and I did was that book club, was the book club that we first used to attend, right? We read so
Mhm.
many great books, and it was always such a great discussion at the table. We were able to really share some of our issues in a safe space. But I had to work through a lot of my stuff with my mom, and like to the point where I just wanted my mom to tell me that I was good, that I was a
Mhm.
good kid, that I was a good daughter, that I was a good wife, that I was a good mother. But I never got that from her. But the funniest thing about all of that was I died. Like I was waiting for my mom to say that. And the day that I felt my worth and value, and I knew in my heart of hearts that I was good enough, and I was seen and heard by myself and by God and by my husband and by my kids. I still remember I was in the kitchen and I was doing dishes. My mom was sitting in the family room, and she said to me, she said, "You know, you're a really good mother." She said that to me. And
Mm.
I swear, any other day, I would have dropped everything and I would have ran to her and like fell in her lap and cried. But I just stood there already knowing that,
Mhm.
because I feel like I am. I feel like I've dedicated a lot of my time and effort in knowing who I am so I could be better for my kids. And that's what she ended up seeing, but it was stuff that I already knew. So it was funny how she
Mhm.
said it after I had done the work.
Yeah.
Right? So this is why, I always hear about people and they have these really tumultuous relationships with their parents. And it's what comes up for them is the lack of worthiness and value, like, or that my
Mhm.
parents were not emotionally available for me. So what have we done in this day and age? Our generations, like Gen X, I would say, our parents were not emotionally available for us. So what we've done with our kids is we've become super emotionally available for them, right?
Mhm.
And but again, that can cause trauma too, right?
Its own
That can
issues,
cause
yeah.
issues, it's a whole different set of issues. So it's just about understanding like how to come to that sort of middle place and you know do the work on ourselves where we're not creating the opposite effect on our kids than what we experienced as children, right? So
Mhm. Mhm.
and that always stems to that always goes back to being self-aware,
Mhm.
just and just knowing that my parents had that experience, and as a result they raised us a certain way, and now we're raising our kids a certain way. But where that cycle stops is the ability to pick up a book and talk to a mentor or a therapist and just understand that something that happened is not sitting right with me. It's not serving me right now. It's not allowing me to move forward. Like I'm so stuck in the past.
Mhm. Yeah.
Right.
And I know, I mean, my gut feeling, and now I don't have, like, any research to back this up, there's probably something out
Uh-huh.
there that I could find, but my gut feeling tells me that nobody ever regrets forgiving someone,
Hmm.
right? But they probably regret not forgiving them,
I think
right?
you're
Like,
right.
if you were to ask 100 people on their deathbed,
Hmm. Hmm.
"What's your biggest regret?" I'm sure a lot of them were, when I stopped talking to so and so, and when I, you know, it's not and not loving more,
Hmm.
right? So it's and it's hard to it's hard when you're in it and you're in the anger and you're in that resentment, you're in that hurt, you're maybe in a little bit of a victim mentality, and that's okay, but knowing that it is your choice to step through it
Yeah.
and stop drinking the poison,
Yeah.
because that's another amazing quote that we love from the amazing Nelson Mandela, that said, resentment is like swallowing poison and expecting your enemy to die.
Mhm.
Because when he was released from jail, 27 years of imprisonment, and not just imprisonment, but torture, he forgave everybody. He said, I
Mhm.
forgive you. And nobody would blame him for not forgiving them,
Mhm.
but he forgave them because he knew that that resentment was going to eat him up inside like poison.
Mhm.
Because the people, like, they're dealing with their own stuff, whether they're holding on to resentment or whether they've moved on, we don't know. But what we do know is what we're dealing with inside. So choosing forgiveness, choosing acceptance, choosing to believe that our family members are really doing the best they could, um, with the resources that they have or had, right? Because let's face it, our parents, most of them are immigrants,
Yeah.
right? And just that immigrant story of leaving a homeland to
Mhm.
come to another country, like, most of us will never understand what that's like
Mhm.
in this day and age, you know? So that in itself, uprooting, right? And trying to maintain your cultural values and traditions in a new land that is forcing you in a way to conform to a Western world. And so that in itself is stressful. It
Mhm.
was sort of like a survival for
Mhm.
most of our parents, or most of our grandparents and our parents, right? It was a survival mode. So, in living in that space, you can only imagine what their responses to life would be,
Right.
right? And how that would affect how they're raising us. So, really, when we can become aware of that and when we can see that with a clearer vision, we can choose forgiveness and we can find more harmony in these family gatherings.
Mhm.
And maybe it's avoiding certain conversations, right?
Mhm.
Like, if you know, bringing up certain conversations, whether it's politics, whether it's whatever it is, triggering conversations, you avoid that,
Mhm.
right? Maybe you play a game,
Mhm.
lighten the mood with some games. Games, Shar knows me, I'm such a game
Yeah,
player.
you are. You're so good at it.
I'm the game leader. So maybe it's playing games. Maybe it's getting the kids involved, getting them to put on a show, just something to ease the tension and shift the focus.
Mhm.
Because, like you said from the very beginning, Shar, not only are we stepping into these gatherings with our own point of view, everyone else is doing it too. And it's not
Right.
like they're not just as stressed as we are,
Mhm.
right? So understanding that that underlying energy is there, so how can we now choose to elevate it in some way to ease that? Because at the end of the day, it really is only a few hours
Well,
and
and
then you're
also
kind of back to your regular life.
and also remember, like, forgiving is not about forgetting.
Right.
Forgiving is about remembering without anger. You know what
Hmm.
I mean? So, uh, it's remembering without that emotion attachment, because this is the truth, right? Like, when you do remember and when you understand that this I was hurt in this particular situation, maybe you can forgive, but you're not you're not angry about it anymore, but now you've also understood how to lay boundaries down for yourself
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
that you can keep yourself safe and not and not taking advantage of, let's say, in a situation. But those boundaries are really important, right? Where you're teaching people how you want to be treated.
Yeah.
And then you have to be okay with that. And the other thing that came up for me also, just as you're speaking, is and I don't remember where I read this, but it was a quote that said something like, the only way out of it is through it, right? So
Hmm.
if you are in a place where you're willing to have a conversation with somebody and a tough conversation because of wherever you are, the only way out of that is through it. So that means that there is going to be some hurt and some issues and some challenges and some trauma that does show up. But are you open and willing to, you know, get through all that stuff with a fine tooth comb, right? Because it's
Mhm.
not just one person. It takes two to tango, right? So there are two people that are coming to the table, and we have to be ready to like iron everything out, right? And I think like I said, I want to talk about the ego for a second. So the ego is designed to protect us, right? The
Mhm.
ego is designed to protect a lot of our hurt and insecurities. So
Mhm.
when you are willing and open to have a conversation with somebody, it is going to be ugly. And I say that because when the ego starts to die, it's really painful. It's really hard to leave this old version of yourself that you have thought has protected you all this time to walk into a place of real unconditional love, right?
Mhm.
So, I mean, it's not pretty all the time. It really
Mhm.
isn't. What I'm going to say though, because I know that I've done a lot of this stuff continually in my own family, and I feel like I've whether anybody else in my family believes it or not, I feel like I've showed up in a better place in my life. Um, Not everybody is going to be accepting of where you end up. And
Right.
it might still be that people don't want anything to do with you. I have to wake up every morning and look at myself in the mirror and say, did I do the best that could? Is there something that I can do that's better today? Can I be better? And then that's where all of the unraveling happens again. And then, you go through your therapist, your mentors, your friends, your support group, whoever it is, and they help you figure stuff out, and then you feel solid again. And remember, it's that journey. It's not a destination, right? This is always going to happen. I mean,
Yeah.
you and I were just talking about things that were sort of showing up for us in our life right now. And I always feel like just before you're about to level up, stuff shows up for you. But
Yeah.
are you willing to look in the mirror? Are you
Yeah.
willing to look in the mirror and say, you know what? I've done the best that I can, and I cannot blame anybody for what is going on. I need to look at myself. Like, can I do that? That's what I have to that's what I wake up every morning saying. Did I do the best that I could? Is there something that I
Mhm.
could do that's better?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So,
Absolutely.
anyway,
Absolutely.
and
So, listen, we hope you are all doing the best you can during this holiday season. And another thing to remember is that when you get overwhelmed with the materialism of the season, I know that it was never the things that I got as a child that made a difference, but rather the love that I felt and the experiences that I had with my family that really resonated. So keep that in mind. You
yeah.
don't have to get everything on your kids' lists or whoever you're buying for, but by showing up in your authentic self with love, with forgiveness in your heart, that is the energy that comes in to this time of year. And we hope you all feel that. Let us know in the comments, message us, tell us how you're feeling during this time. We'd love to chat further on this. And thank you so much for listening. Have a very happy, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, all that good stuff. And we can't wait to be back soon.
Take care, everyone. Happy holidays.